the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of gold and blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50 to 10 to 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Von Austin.
But Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride.
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
We've no doubt tonight they shouldn't have played the old Golden Boot. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the gold and blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads webcast, March 30th edition, and we've got news to cover across both sports. Of course, yesterday Rich Rod met with the media following a scrimmage for the WVU football team, so got some nice highlights from his press conference, and we also had our first chance to hear from tight ends coach Michael Nysewander. We'll go over some notes from his press conference as well, some really good details involved there, including how they're going to evaluate this roster for the upcoming roster cuts that are going to be happening that we've been talking about here that's going to happen after the spring game. They got that week of meetings, and then they're going to decide, who's going to be on the roster, who's not going to be on the roster before that transfer portal opens, and they go and get some transfers to add to the roster. And speaking of adding transfers to the roster, that's the main piece of news we have on the basketball side. Is we know it's going to be a completely rebuilt roster for the Mountaineer Hoops yet again for the second straight season, and they have already begun working on that. They've contacted multiple transfer targets. We'll go over each of them, kind of highlight their stats, some of the guys to maybe keep an eye on that West Virginia is trying to work on getting to commit to the Mountaineers, as that transfer portal is open in basketball currently in WVU, wasting no time getting to work here trying to formulate a roster on the basketball side for new coach Ross Hodge. So that's kind of the agenda today. We'll lead it off with the football talk, then get into a little bit of that basketball talk in the back half of the show, where we'll talk about these transfer portal targets, which some really talented guys that the Mountaineers are after. But before we get into that, just wanted to say appreciate you guys tuning in, whether you're watching live or watching after the fact on the playback. If you're watching live on Facebook or Twitch, do got to encourage you to come over to our YouTube channel, subscribe here so you can get access to the pre-recorded videos, podcast episodes, in addition to these live streams. But if you are here on YouTube, whether you're watching live or after the fact, hit that thumbs up button, help us out a ton with that YouTube algorithm, help this find more Mountaineer fans like yourself, and they can get access to these updates as we look forward to a new year, a new era in both sports, as Rich Rod will be in year one of his 2.0 era, and we'll have year one of the Ross Hodge era. So new coaches in both sports, new era for both sports, and we'll be covering the rosters as they're formulated. The staff that was formulated on the football, we covered that, and we'll be doing the same on the basketball side. So plenty to talk about here. So with no further ado, let's lead it off talking about the football news coming out of the press conferences. Some notes here from Rich Rod's press conference, then we will get into tight end coach Michael Nysewander's press conference. But as far as Rich Rod is concerned, he said the majority of the practice was a scrimmage yesterday, which is good to hear. They ran about 90-plus plays and believes they got some good stuff on tape that is going to help with the evaluations. Of course, more on that in a bit, as he kind of went into detail as to how they're going to evaluate these players to help determine roster spots. As we know, that 105 player roster limit is approaching. West Virginia going to have to make some tough decisions following spring football, so this scrimmage will help go into that. So the effort was better, but still not where it needs to be. And then he clarified a little bit, because he said it was brought to his attention that, from his last press conference, which is something that we covered here on the show in our last stream, was that people thought that he was unhappy with the roster overall, and he wanted to clarify that he's not unhappy with the roster. He's more so just unhappy with the depth at certain positions, and that's why he made the comments that he did that we had addressed about going out and getting, players at pretty much every position, save for quarterback and long snapper, I think were the two that he omitted there. But he said, it's not that he's unhappy with the players that are on the roster. He does like a lot of the guys that they have. They just need more depth at a lot of positions. So he did clarify that. I said the purpose of the scrimmage was to hopefully raise the level of competition. As we heard him talk about in the last press conference, the guys really weren't competing at a high level in the previous practice, so they figured, with the scrimmage setting, going against each other, that would raise the level of competition, and said he'll need to watch the tape, though, to see if that did happen, especially for certain guys that he feels like are kind of on the edge of being on the roster or not being on the roster, and he really wants to evaluate them further, so he will wait till he watches the tape to say if they competed harder, more up to the standard that they're expected to meet here under Coach Rod. And then to go along with that, he said they call the meeting rooms truth rooms, because that's where they're honest with the players about where they sit on the depth chart, what they need to work on, etc., to ensure that they're going to be one of the players that makes this roster as they get set to cut this thing down following spring football. And speaking of when he wants to have that 105-player roster solidified, he was asked that question, I believe, by Tony Caridi, and he said, the 105-player roster, they want to have it solidified by July. So that's kind of when we can expect this thing to wrap up as far as transfers out, transfers in. We'll start to get clarity on that after spring football. That transfer portal window opens a week after West Virginia's spring game, so we'll start to see who's moving out, who West Virginia's targeting to bring onto the roster. And if you want to stay up to date on all of those things, we will do constant transfer portal updates here on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel, so be sure you're subscribed here if you haven't already. We'll keep you up to date on this roster. Today's day and age, it's kind of hard to know who's going to be on the roster any given year, but we always try and provide you guys that information. If you stay tuned in here, you'll know by the time the first game rolls around exactly who's going to be on West Virginia's roster. That's something we try and focus on every year, and it's something that I love is following the roster and the roster movement. And this was kind of one of the more interesting tidbits here from his press conference, I thought, is because he really broke down how they're going to evaluate these individual players to determine these roster spots. And this is, I think, a good way of going about it. They're going to create individual cut-ups, individual videos for each, every single player on the roster. And on those videos, it's going to have their one-on-one reps from practice throughout the spring, their 7-on-7 reps in practice throughout the spring, and their performances, some of their plays that they made or didn't make, however that went in the scrimmages. So all that's going to be involved in these individual cut-ups, and all the coaches will watch it. They'll probably go over it with the players when they're having those meetings that they're going to have following the conclusion of spring practice, but all the coaches are going to watch it individually as well to help determine where these players stand on the roster moving forward. And he said the reason that he wants to go about it that way is because it's really going to take the emotion out of it. Because, if you don't have this video proof, this video evidence to go back to, he feels like, sometimes guys can revert to say, well, he's a really good guy. He tries his best. Maybe he does deserve a spot. And he said, so that helps take emotion out of it, and it's going to be strictly performance-based decisions as to who stays on the roster and who doesn't. And then also, I think that gives you, video evidence, video proof. So if you're telling a guy, hey, we think it's best you hit the portal and move on after the spring, then they say, why? I did this, or that. Then they can literally pull up the video and show them, well, here you are, you're loafed on this, you were lazy here, this was a little bit soft, this wasn't hard edge, whatever they want to showcase, they literally have the proof in the pudding, so to speak, to be able to show these guys the reason why they're on the roster or the reason why they aren't on the roster. And I think that's a great way to go about it, so I like the way that they're approaching that, not only using their own evaluations that they've seen throughout the spring already and their own personal feelings that are involved there, but literally having video of each of the individual players' plays, their scrimmage performance, everything throughout the spring to be able to come to that decision is a great way to go about it. And then, of course, he was asked a question about the early enrollees, if any of them were standing out. He wouldn't answer the question about which of the early enrollees are standing out because he said, if I tell you, someone will tamper and come try and steal them away. But I can let you know right now what I've heard as far as the early enrollees. I know a lot of them are performing well, but the one that's really, I think, caught the coach's eye a lot is quarterback Scotty Fox. Scotty Fox is really standing out right now, especially being a true freshman, and I think he's someone that they believe is going to have a good career here. Obviously, that's not going to come right away. He's not going to be involved in the competition this year for the starting job, I do not believe, but he is definitely, I think, one that's going to make the roster, that's going to stick around, and that could have a very bright future even if he does redshirt this season. They like what they've gotten out of Scotty Fox at the quarterback position. That's one of the early enrollees I do know of that has had a good spring. So Coach Rich Rodriguez may not tell you that, but I can tell you guys that here because I don't think any opponents are looking at the Country Roads webcast streams here for information. So I will let that one slip. But then one of my favorite quotes, you guys know I always try and pick out at least one quote to highlight here in these press conference notes as we've been covering them throughout the spring. And the one that really stood out to me here, I think will get you guys excited as well, was he was talking about the season opening game. And he's talked about it multiple times, and he's always asking, hey, what's the date of the opener? And they're like, August 30th or 31st, whichever it is. So he doesn't know the exact date of the opener, but he followed that up with this quote. I know who's on 9/13. So, he already has that Pitt game circled as we were kind of all expecting him to, and definitely means a lot to him for multiple reasons, and especially that date of 9/13, I'm sure, like I've said all along, that's kind of poetic justice that's the date that we're playing them on Rich Rod's first game back at WVU. But he said, I know who's on 9/13, and that was my favorite quote of the press conference for sure. And then he ended the press conference with a nice tidbit, something that we've talked about in the past here on the CRW is, quarterbacks have had great success under Coach Rodriguez going all the way back to the early days of his system. And he highlighted that every quarterback that he's coached for at least 2 years has either been an all-conference player or even won Conference Player of the Year. So if you go back to Jed Drenning at Glenville State, Sean King at Tulane, Woody Dantzler at Clemson, Rashid here at WVU, Pat White here at WVU, Jannard Robinson in Michigan, Khalil Tate at Arizona, and then most recently Tyler Huff at Jack State actually did it in only one season, but all the other ones that he coached at least 2 seasons were all conference players or players of the year, every single one of them on down the list at every different stop there, which is super impressive. So those were the notes I had from Rich Rod's press conference. I think the most interesting thing that came out of that press conference was the fact of him detailing how they're going to evaluate these players as they attempt to make these roster cuts in the near future. Let me get to tight ends coach Michael Nysewander's press conference now, and then I will get to some of your all's questions, comments that are in here live, and appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have any questions, throw them there in the chat. I will address some of those. I'm going to take a swig of my coffee, and then we'll talk a little bit about tight ends coach Michael Nysewander and what he had to say. All right, so tight end coach Michael Nysewander coming over from Jack State, where he was there with Rich Rod, going through his college career, though. You can go look back and, opening up holes for that Alabama run game under Nick Saban was a guy they called Highway 46, and that was none other than Michael Nysewander, who, had that fullback background as well, but has really been a good coach early in his career, and is a guy that I like a lot. From hearing his first press conference, I liked a lot of the things that he had to say. I think he's going to fit in very well here. But as far as some notes I took from his press conference, said he sees a lot of competitiveness out of the tight ends. He said keeps looking for one of them to separate themselves, but it says they're making it hard on him because they are all competing really well right now, which is a positive sign that all the tight ends that we have are all, adjusting really well to this system. The ones that are having to adjust, of course, Jacob Barrett coming over from Jack State probably knows it a little bit better. He also mentioned that, Jacob Barrett is getting to fulfill a lifelong dream, getting to play at WVU, something that he always wanted, being a West Virginia native, and now for his, final year here gets to the chance to do that. He said some of the tight ends were recruited to a different system, but they're all adapting well to all the things that are required of them in this offense, which there's multiple things, and we've talked about this in the past, that they're going to be required to do. This offense doesn't utilize fullbacks in Rich Rod's system, but they really have leaned heavily into tight end usage, especially over the past couple of seasons. There will be times where there's multiple tight ends on the field at once, and also, the way that they use them helps with the tempo of the offense, which I'll touch on more here in just a second. Says he hasn't seen any of them that are unable to do something that they're being asked to do. So that's positive, because I think sometimes when we looked at this roster initially, we saw, guys like maybe a Greg Genross that we kind of saw as more of a pass-catching tight end. Would he be able to do the things in the blocking game that were required? And, some of the blocking tight ends, were they going to be able to do some of the things in the receiving game that was required? But it sounds like, according to him, that all of them are able to do everything that they were asked, which is, a net positive for that tight end position for sure. And this is where we talk a little bit about the tempo here and how these tight ends are really important in us utilizing that up-tempo offense that we're going to be using, which is going to be so fun to watch this upcoming season. The tight ends being versatile helps the tempo to be faster on offense, because if the offense doesn't sub, we know that the defense can't substitute, so then the defense isn't slowing you down. You can go as fast as you want to. And the tight ends play a big part in that because there may be, one play you may start off, they're attached on the line. Then you may go to another play where they're out in the slot. Then you may go to another play where they're kind of in an H-back role, but you don't have to substitute, a certain tight end for another one. You don't have to say, hey, this is our blocking tight end, this is our receiving tight end. If you've got a guy that's versatile and can do all of those things, you don't have to take him off the field. The defense isn't going to be able to substitute. You're going to be able to run that fast up-tempo style, which, according to Coach Nysewander, is super fast. He said they will use multiple tight ends at once at times in the offense, and I think that's something you've seen if you watched a little bit of Jack State last year. Sometimes 12 personnel, one running back and 2 tight ends. Occasionally even 13 personnel, 1 running back and 3 tight ends. So you will see that at times in this offense. And then just to go along with what I said there about the tempo, his exact quote was, a lot of offenses talk about going fast, but they aren't going Coach Rod fast. So he thinks this tempo is, otherworldly and compared to other offenses that use an up-tempo style, which is going to be fun to watch, as I've said, time and time again, and I can't wait to have that up-tempo style back here at WVU. Was asked about his recruiting base. Said he did spend some time recruiting Ohio a little bit, but of course, as we talked about, he did play at Alabama. So his kind of home recruiting base is going to be the Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Alabama areas down there, kind of in the southeast, will kind of be where he's more recruiting out of, which we've heard the staff talk about throughout the spring, that as far as recruiting areas, the coaches are kind of just wanting the staff members to focus on areas where they have good relationships and go recruit those areas. And for him, obviously that's in the southeast. And the last note I have from his press conference here is that he played for, of course, Coach Saban and now has coached under Coach Rod for a little bit. And he kind of compared the two a little bit and said, after having played for Coach Saban and now been with Rich Rodriguez for a while, he said the two were actually very similar, especially with kind of the culture that they establish, because that blue-collar, hard-working mentality, the hard-edge stuff that Rich Rod brings, he said Coach Saban's, very much a proponent of that, even if he doesn't necessarily call it hard-edge. So he said there's a lot of similarities between the two, and he, of course, tied that into both of them being from the Mountain State. So good stuff there from tight end Coach Michael Nysewander, and good stuff there from Coach Rodriguez as well. Time and time again throughout the spring here, I've really enjoyed listening to Coach Rod's press conference because, it's clear cut and dry what he's going to give to you, and it's not that coach speak that we've had in years previous where you're being sold something that's not true. He's going to tell you exactly like it is, and it's really refreshing and makes it easier to cover these press conferences and kind of know what he's talking about there. And it was nice to get to hear from the tight ends coach for the first time as well. But having said that, let me catch up on some of your all's comments. Then we'll switch gears here, talk a little bit of basketball as they're trying to overhaul that roster that they're going to need to rebuild for the upcoming season. And they've reached out to multiple transfer targets, and we'll talk a little bit about each of those for sure. All right. Ian Whitehead, good to see you in here, man. He says, biggest fan, watch every day, going to work and going home. Hey, appreciate that, Ian. We love you too as well, man. I appreciate your support there as always. Eric Flower says, energy drinks and Mountaineer updates. Hey, that's right. That's right. I got my coffee, so, right along the same lines there with you, Eric. You guys know I always usually keep coffee on hand. That's kind of my drink of choice for the most part. Every now and then I switch it up, but usually got my coffee here. Eric says he's taking WVU to beat the spread on 9-13. I think that's a good bet to make. I think that's a game where Rich Rod's going to be out for blood, so to speak, and I think it's going to be a good performance from the Mountaineers, and still got my fingers crossed that hopefully that ends up being a night game in Morgantown. Devil Dog 44 says that QB stat is impressive, no matter who the coach is or what league they're in. 100% Devil Dog. I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, that's literally success at every stop he's been at, all the way back to Glenville State. Each one of those quarterbacks, being an all-conference performer or a player of the year, from Glenville State to Tulane to Clemson to West Virginia to Michigan to Arizona and to Jack State last year, where Tyler Huff was super impressive. Player of the year in that conference, 2,100 yards passing, 1,200 yards rushing, a very great year. And, that's a guy that we've talked about in the past, doesn't have, the most speed, but was a very willing runner, as Rich Rod calls it. And I think his running style was similar to that of Nico Marchiol. So, if you were worried about Nico being successful in this offense, I think look no further than Jack State last year. If Nico ends up being the guy, of course, I'm big Jalen Henderson guy as well. You guys have heard me say that in the past. I'm anxious to see how that turns out because I think they're both really talented quarterbacks. And throughout the spring here, that's the one position that has received some praise from Coach Rod, has been the quarterback. So it looks like we're in good shape there as well to maybe continue that tradition for Coach Rod, which is awesome. Shaq said, Nico's dad told me the other day the team needs a lot of work, which I guess is to be expected this early. Great point, Shaq. Appreciate you always, channel member here. And I think Rich Rod has kind of, more or less said the same, that I think more so it's, to me, the way that I read it, because he even clarified he likes the roster, doesn't like the depth, but I think a lot of the guys that were recruited by the previous staff aren't necessarily the same type of players that Rich Rod would have recruited, right? I heard even Whitey Williams, who, if you guys haven't checked out the old grad podcast, check that out. It's him and his brother Reed Williams, of course, former great West Virginia linebacker, and then Crum who used to be on the Section 304 podcast, but he's good friends with Pat McAfee. And according to him, Pat McAfee said a lot of the guys that came over from Jack State have said that the players that were left over here on this roster, from the previous staff, that they've never really met so many nice guys. They've never played football with so many nice guys. So, that just goes to tell you the difference of the type of players that the previous staff recruits versus what this staff is going to recruit. And I think that that's one reason that a lot of these guys, you hear Rich Rod continue to say, we're not competitive enough. We need to up the ante. It's just a complete 180 in style, and I much more think that the style that Rich Rod and his staff employs is going to be much more effective here at WVU and is a much better fit than the previous staff and the players that they went after were, nice guys, maybe not necessarily the best recipe for winning football games out there on the field when you got to get, down in the nitty gritty, and we need that blue collar, tough, hard edge mentality more so than the nice guys, I think. Hey, good to see you, Coos. Everyone go check out Coos, of course. I'm sure most of you do already, but if you don't, you definitely should. Great WVU content, but great college football content in general. They're covering the Big 12, covering realignment, which, that's something that I don't have a great grasp on. It all makes my head spin, but sometimes watching his channel helps me understand it a little bit more in regards to that stuff, so you guys be sure check that out, and also check him out on Hoops from the Hills, where he covers WVU basketball as well. Good morning, Coos. Good to see you in here, brother. Always appreciate you. Devil Dog 44 said, I really liked Reed Carrico and Rodney Gallagher's interviews, and Rodney Gallagher looks jacked already. Wait until he's in game shape. Yeah, I know he definitely has transformed his body, and from all reports I've heard from the spring, he's really been doing a great job as one of the receivers that's kind of stood out. So it seems like it could be, a breakout year for Rodney Gallagher, and I think, judging by Reed Carrico's comments and his comments as well, they both fit better with this new regime also. And Rodney Gallagher, even, one of his quotes, I don't want to misquote it, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he said, he's never had a coach that, pushed him to, be the best version of himself, and a lot of things that he said are kind of echoing things that we've talked about here on these streams throughout the spring, that winning is the main goal with this staff, and their mentality is just completely different. And I think, some of the comments, they weren't necessarily trying to be, disparaging to Neil Brown and the previous staff, but you could certainly read them as such, and it just goes to show that it's a complete 180 staff-wise for sure. But yeah, great interviews there by both of those guys. I did have a chance to finally watch both of those recently. Haven't had a chance to watch Oliver Strauss yet, but I'm sure his was good as well for sure. Eric Flowers says, I watched a 45-minute highlight video of Pat White last night. Those never get old, do they? Those never get old. I know the closer we get to the season, I'm going to have to break out some of these, especially once we get a couple weeks away. I usually just watch them on a loop, the old highlight DVDs, which I love those so much for sure. But yeah, so glad they got him working with these southpaws, Eric says. And that's, another great detail. Both Nico Marchiol, Jalen Henderson, left-handed quarterbacks. Of course, Pat White, the greatest left-handed quarterback ever at WVU, right? Arguably the greatest in general. But definitely, I think having him that has experience in this system, that has experience, having success at that position at WVU, being a left-handed quarterback is going to pay dividends with these guys. And maybe that's one reason that position continues to receive praise, because not only Pat White, but also Rhett Rodriguez, who grew up in this system, learning it, played in it, has coached in it for a while now. I think you have a lot of guys that are going to help those quarterbacks, and they are going to be successful at that position this upcoming season for sure. WVU Earl says, good morning, Mountaineer Nation. Hey, good morning to you, WVU Earl. Always appreciate you, channel member here as well. Devil Dog 44 says, I think it's an indictment of the previous staff when they talk about addressing mistakes immediately. Yeah, another, positive that's been mentioned is the way that they go about that. They don't wait to correct it on film, just let things go by. It's right then and there, something's wrong. We're going to let you know what you're doing wrong. We're going to let you know why we think this play was lazy, why this isn't something that's going to meet our standards. And, if you're not going to meet our standards, you're not going to stick around. That's something Rich Rod has echoed multiple times throughout his press conferences. There's not going to be softness. There's not going to be laziness. Just like his quote from the last press conference, every fan that buys a ticket, that buys a season ticket to a Mountaineer game is not going to watch somebody be soft or lazy, because if somebody is soft or lazy, they're not going to play for the Mountaineers, which is so awesome for sure. For sure, Devil Dog, I agree. Koo says, I totally agree about addressing mistakes when they occur. It's still fresh on the player's mind and easier to correct, in my opinion. Yeah, great point there as well. If you point out to them, hey, this is what you did wrong, this is what you need to do right then and there, they can, start from that moment. And right, like you said, right when it's fresh in their mind, and they can make those adjustments a lot quicker. Got a super chat rolling in here from my guy Trey Edwards. Appreciate you also, as always, channel member here. He says, hit the like button, also become a member. Yeah, hit the like button. That helps us out fast, easy, and free, whether you're watching live or on the playback. It really does give us a nice boost to the channel there with that crazy YouTube algorithm. And as he says there, become a member, man. If you're someone that's a WVU fan that can't get enough West Virginia sports content, highly recommend it. For as low as $1.99 a month, you can hit the Wild and Wonderful level. But even, the Almost Heaven level is only $4.99 a month. So that's, a little bit over $1 a week. It's hard to find anything in the grocery store even that's less than $5, and that's, $4.99 a month. And you're going to get film reviews, you're going to get game rewatch commentaries, you're going to get behind-the-scenes content. Of course, you'll get the WVU football helmet badges besides Trey's name there, custom emojis. And then when we get into football season, player grade streams, snap counts, injury reports, depth chart updates, all kinds of bonus content there. So if you're someone that can't get enough, definitely recommend becoming a channel member here. And we always appreciate that support. It helps keep this mic recording and that camera rolling. And you can do that by hitting the join button in the video description, or heading over to the YouTube channel homepage and hitting the join button there. Appreciate that, Trey. Always appreciate you, man. Thank you for that super chat, man. Let's see here. Tosh Miller says, hit the like button. Appreciate that, Tosh. Appreciate you guys always helping me remember to let people know that hitting that like button helps us out a lot, for sure. Let's see. See if we got any other questions, comments in here. Trey says, Rodney looks absolutely huge. Yeah, you could tell he's really transformed his body. I was impressed even by that when you see him in the press conference, much less, you add to that the great quotes and comments that he had throughout that press conference, for sure. Aku said, to be honest, I get realignment fatigue. I understand that, man. Like I said, it makes my head spin, and I don't even have to cover it. So I can only imagine you trying to cover it, how much you get fatigued by it, for sure. Yeah, it's hard for me to follow. Sometimes I don't understand all the revenue splits and all of this stuff, man. It's just too much for me to grasp. I think it takes a smarter mind than mine, maybe. So I'm glad that you handle that. But I could definitely see the realignment fatigue, for sure, man, for sure. But people love to talk about it, though. That's one good thing about it. James Weekly says Maryland head coach is now the Villanova head coach. Yeah, interesting the way that played out. We talked about that a little bit in our stream when we were covering the coaching search, that was one domino that could have affected West Virginia's coaching search, as it was believed that Willard would be a candidate at Villanova. Kind of interesting move there. Some people may call it lateral, but I think there's a lot of funny things, I guess, going on in the Maryland athletic department, including, a new athletic director that led him to make that move. So now looks like the Maryland job will be open, but Villanova filling their job with Kevin Willard, which appreciate you providing that great segue into talking a little basketball now, guys. I'll try and catch up on y'all's comments one more time here before we wrap up in a few. But here we got to talk a little bit of basketball here on the back half of the show, because one thing that we know now, we got Ross Hodge in place, but there's going to have to be a new staff established. But also, and probably even more importantly, is there's going to have to be a roster overhaul yet again, completely rebuilding the roster. And the main way that you're going to do that in today's day and age is via the transfer portal. And, the good thing about Ross Hodge is he's a guy that has experience in that, having coached at the JUCO level where your roster gets rated every year. He had great success there, 146 wins and only 24 losses across multiple stops at the JUCO level, rebuilding a roster. But then even last season at North Texas, he took a team that won 19 games the year before and had to completely rebuild that roster, only returned 10% of their scoring, lost 4 of their 5 starters, so he had to hit the portal then. brought in some really talented players, and look at him now, 27 wins already and still at least one more game remaining for them in that NIT. So he has experience rebuilding a roster. He's going to have to do it here at WVU, and the Mountaineers are already reaching into that transfer portal and targeting multiple players. So let's talk about some of the ones that they have made contact with that we maybe should keep an eye on to potentially join the roster in the near future. So let's check this out here. We'll kind of try and go in order here as I have these tabs. We'll pull up each one, and then I'll pull up their stats as well. So one that West Virginia has contacted and has actually apparently setting up a meeting or a Zoom call with, a virtual meeting, I guess you could say, is Troy transfer guard Tayton Connerway. He's setting up Zoom meetings per his representatives there with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Kansas State, and Virginia, and he's a very good player. As you see, Sun Belt Player of the Year this past season there at Troy, which of course was a team that did make the tournament. And so let's pull up his stats from the previous season here as well, and see what his numbers were looking like. I think it would be a good player for West Virginia to land if they could potentially do it, but obviously a lot of suitors after him after a nice year there being Sun Belt Player of the Year. 6'3" guard here, averaged over 14 points, nearly 5 rebounds a game, nearly 5 assists per game while shooting over 47% from the field. And also, something that I like here, if you look at his stats here, averaged nearly 3 steals per game. And we know that Coach Hodge is going to employ a really, strong defensive style. So a guy that averaged nearly 3 steals this year after averaging 2 steals per game last year, not only is he threat on offense, but a really good defensive player as well. So that's certainly something that could be a fit. So watch out, keep an eye on Tayton Connerway and where he ends up, because West Virginia may be in the mix there for his services. That is one target there. Let's talk about another one here. We have multiple to talk about here, which is a good sign that West Virginia is already, working on multiple guys here in the transfer portal. We can talk a little bit about this one here. As John Rothstein put out, UNC Wilmington transfer Harlan Obioha is receiving interest from the following programs per his agents, those being Wichita State, Wake Forest, Mississippi State, Rutgers, and West Virginia. So let's look up Mr. Harlan Obioha here, pull up his stats as well. And this one I like because one thing that we lacked last season, I think we can all agree on, was, enough big men, and especially big men with size. And Harlan Obioha would fit that description. A 7-footer here, nearly 300 pounds there at 280. So there's a big body that you could add to the roster. Had a good season there at UNC Wilmington, another tournament team there. Let's shout out to Craig Ponder, a guy that's from the same high school as me, Bluefield High School. He's a assistant on that UNC Wilmington staff. But Harlan Obioha, 9.2 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, and shot nearly 64% from the field. You look at his stats as well, a good rim protector, 1.2 blocks per game, which is something that he's increased every single year. Played in all 35 games this year, over 20 minutes per game. And good numbers there, and you love the size. Of course, you need to add some size to this roster, so keep an eye on Mr. Obioha there from UNC Wilmington. Then we still have, I think, 3 or 4 more here that we have already targeted. So we're talking, 5+ players that West Virginia has already reached out to in the portal here, still early in the process before Coach Ross Hodge has even made it to Morgantown, right? The following schools have also reached out to UT Martin guard Terrence Ginyard. This is according to the portal report. West Virginia, LMU, Oklahoma State, UNLV, New Mexico, and more. So let's pull up the stats here from the UT Martin guard Terrence Ginyard as well. Look at some of his numbers, which are pretty impressive. He was a good scorer there at UT Martin. And as you see here, 6'2" junior guard. He averaged over 16 points per game, nearly 5 rebounds, which is really good, especially being a guard there at 6'2", 2.3 assists per game, and shot 44% from the field. We look down here at his other numbers, 33% from the three-point line, not bad job there, and was averaging over a steal per game also. So yet again, another player that plays on both ends. High volume scorer, over 16 points per game, but also looks like he plays some good defense as well, which of course we know will be a calling card of the Mountaineers under Coach Ross Hodge. So Terrence Ginyard from UT Martin, another target for the Mountaineers. And then we have still, I think, 3 more here we're going to highlight. this one here may be the best scorer of the bunch that we're going to talk about, and that is FDU star Terrence Brown. As you can see, a long list of schools that he's heard from since entering the portal. This coming from Deshaun London on X here. SMU, Colorado, Clemson, Murray State, Texas Tech, Providence, Seton Hall, of course, West Virginia, Boston College, Butler, Memphis, TCU, Texas A&M, and Washington State. And as we look at his numbers, this is a very high volume scorer that you would love to add to the roster there, coming from Fairleigh Dickinson. Another guard here, a little bit better, size-wise at 6'3", but nearly 21 points per game, as you see there, top 10 in the country in scoring average with his 20.6 points per game. Also grabbed nearly 6 rebounds per game and 3 assists. So not only is he a great scorer, but he has multiple facets of his game that he excels at. As you see there, grabbing nearly 6 rebounds per game as a guard. That's a good number to have, and of course, good assist ratio there as well. We scroll down here, look at some of the percentages here. Nearly 30% from 3, nearly 45% from the field. Great free throw shooter. And yet again, over 2 steals per game. So yes, great scorer, but also plays on both ends, which we will need at WVU in the future. Could improve the assist-to-turnover ratio, would be something that you would like to see him improve, but I think, a lot of that is probably because he was a very ball-dominant player there at Fairleigh Dickinson that, had a high usage rate there with his nearly 21 points per game to be top 10 in the country. So this will be a good player to add to the roster for sure as a starting block, but a lot of other programs after him as well. We definitely see that. So Terrence Brown, and then a couple more here to highlight. Of course, this will be a growing list, and hopefully West Virginia is able to at least land a couple of these here, but if not, West Virginia is going to reach out and contact a ton of transfer portal players, so don't get discouraged if you see some of these guys commit elsewhere. It's a long process, and West Virginia has plenty of time to build this roster, but according to Jeff Borzello, West Virginia has also reached out to Central Connecticut State transfer Devin Hade, as he's heard from Mississippi State, Texas, St. John's, the Mountaineers, and NC State per his agents. Second-team All-NEC selection there, playing at the D2 level. But he also had some good stats here. Let's pull those up here on ESPN as well, talk about him. And then we have one more potential transfer target to highlight as well, which I think has an interesting connection to Ross Hodge, which we will talk about that momentarily. But let's look at Devin Hade first, who is a lengthy guard here, 6'5" guard from Central Connecticut, averaged over 14 points, nearly 6 rebounds, 2 assists per game. Really good shooting there from the field at 49%, so you're getting close to 50%, which is extremely good, especially someone at the guard position. That's, kind of more something that you see from big men with those higher field goal percentages there. Look at his stats here. We're talking about an 85% free throw shooter and nearly a 32% three-point shooter, so he certainly has a great shooting stroke. Also averaged over 1 steal per game. Assist-to-turnover ratio, not the best, but yet again kind of goes hand in hand with what we said about Terrence Brown previously. Ball-dominant player, especially playing at the level that he was at. Was probably a lot better than his matchup most nights, and someone that the team relied on to use a lot, but still great numbers, especially when you look at his field goal, three-point, and free throw percentage. Certainly someone that West Virginia could use, so keep an eye on Devin Hade, a 6'5" guard from Central Connecticut. And then lastly, we have this one here, which I think is very interesting because you see here on 3 reporting Jason Edwards entering the transfer portal, has, also going through the NBA draft process as a 6'1" junior from Atlanta. But what's interesting here, and shout out to Andrew Corbett, who works for 247 Sports, for putting this out on social media. I don't know if West Virginia has reached out to him yet, so maybe it's a little bit different than some of these other guys, but he definitely has a connection already, because before he went to Vanderbilt this past season, he was playing for Ross Hodge at North Texas the previous year in 2023. So could they reunite in Morgantown? We'll have to see how that plays out. Also, the NBA, still something that he's looking at. He's going to go through the NBA draft process as well. But someone with really good numbers that was on a tournament team, of course, as the SEC had a ton of tournament teams. But Vanderbilt was in there, and Jason Edwards was their leading scorer there. 17 points per game, 2 rebounds per game, 1 assist per game. 6'1" junior guard. Good field goal percentage, nearly 44%. And we look at some of his other numbers here, 35% from the three-point line and 83% from the free throw line. maybe the best shooter that we've encountered yet on this list. 1.3 assists per game, nearly 1 steal per game as well. So definitely seems like kind of the most solely offensive threat on this list. But he played for North Texas in 2023, so he knows defense, and also he would know the system a little bit. And I think getting a couple of guys at least to have as building blocks on this roster, whether they're guy like a Brennan Lorient that may follow Ross Hodge from North Texas, or you get a guy that played for him previously like Jason Edwards here, that would be good to have some guys that know the system, can help other guys learn it as they go along, as the coaches teach it. You could have some players that have experience in it. I think that would be good. So we'll keep an eye on Jason Edwards from Vanderbilt as well, see if he ends up in the NBA, if he ends up transferring somewhere. If he does end up deciding to stay in that portal and transfer somewhere, you got to think West Virginia is a team that has a shot at him with, the connection to Ross Hodge. So there are about 6 different targets right there that West Virginia has already made contact with. There will be more coming up in the very near future for sure. So we'll see how that plays out. But definitely we'll try and keep you guys up to date on the targets West Virginia is going after. And, of course, as guys commit, we'll continue to give you guys transfer portal updates on the basketball side, just like we cover on the football side, which those are going to be coming hot and heavy as well. So if you want to stay up to date on the roster for both of these sports, we'll be keeping you abreast on everything going on roster movement-wise throughout both Mountaineer sports programs, basketball and football, here on the Country Roads webcast. So be sure you're subscribed here to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. James Lucas said, is Chester Frazier staying? TBD, James, but I can tell you that he is still there right now. He is still under contract. Now, if Ross Hodge decides not to keep him, I'm sure he'll take another job. He's going to have plenty of suitors, but he is, one of the coaches still around that's helping West Virginia recruit some of these transfer portal targets and try and get a jump start on building this roster before Ross Hodge comes on board. So Chester Frazier is one of the guys reaching out to some of these players. We'll see if he sticks around, but I would like to see it, but who knows? That's up to Coach Hodge's discretion there to see if that happens for sure. Let's see here. Got any other questions? James Lucas says 22 more Saturdays till college football is back. Hey, we're getting closer. Got the spring game coming up in less than a week now. Super excited to head up there and see what the Mountaineers are looking like. And if the rain holds off, maybe check out a baseball game after that as well. Steven and I are heading up, and our friend JR as well. So excited about that and getting so close to college football, man. Can't wait. Best time of the year if you ask me, for sure. Speaking of Connor Way from Troy there, Koo says he's very talented, body control really good as well. So I do like the young man from Troy. Conference Player of the Year there would be a great addition for the Mountaineers, and appreciate some extra info of him there, Koo. I haven't had a chance to watch a ton of tape on any of these guys yet, but I kind of want to wait until they sign on with the Mountaineers to do that, because I hate, watching it and then getting my hopes up and then the guy landing somewhere else. That's just kind of me trying to battle my own anticipation there and getting my hopes up too much, I guess. But I'll definitely dive in further if any of these guys do end up committing to the Mountaineers. But appreciate the info there, Coos, for sure. I think he's talented, and I would love to see West Virginia land him. James Weekly said, how many North Texas players can transfer to West Virginia? I believe there's 2 left with eligibility, and I think there's a 3rd that they have in their recruiting class that we'll see if West Virginia can get to come to the Mountaineers now if they choose to do that. But the main one I'm keeping an eye on and hoping West Virginia can get to come is Brennan Lorient, the forward there from North Texas. I think that would be a good pickup. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on mainly for sure. Linda Skidmore says if they can get Connor Way and Harris comes back, opponents may never be able to get it over half court. Hey, that would be awesome. I would love to see Sincere Harris return to WVU. I think, of course, any of the players in the portal, KJ Tenner, who has recently came out and said he is open to returning to WVU, would love to see him come back, would love to see Hansberry come back. But personally, I think that Sincere Buck Harris, his style just is tailor-made for a Ross Hodge system. He would be such a good fit. So would love to see that happen. We'll see if it does end up playing out that way, but that's a good point as well. Connor Way, a guy that, averaged multiple steals per game at Troy, and then Harris, of course, we know how great of an on-ball defender he is. Getting both those guys would be awesome to have in the Ross Hodge system for sure. Let's see. James Lucas said, I'm pretty sure Jonathan Powell might go to UNC. I know he was definitely one that UNC was targeting. Of course, you guys know I follow UNC basketball as well, but it's definitely it's a possibility. He has multiple suitors, though. We'll see where he ends up. I think that Isaac McNeely is also a target for UNC, and it seems like Louisville. I don't know if West Virginia is going to be able to get back in the mix with McNeely, which is kind of disappointing. Was hoping they would, but he also is going to have to. He's going to be a guy that demands, a really high NIL value. It seems like he's kind of maybe focused on staying in the ACC. We'll see what happens, but UNC and Louisville definitely in play for Isaac McNeely, from what I understand. Let's see. Trey Edwards says, I want to keep Frazier and Nelson Hernandez. There's a chance with Frazier. I don't believe Nelson Hernandez will be staying. I think I saw him put out on social media something like a graphic with him, and it said portal or whatever. And, he pretty much stated in a reply to someone there that he thinks that Coach Hodge is going to do a great job, and but he, loved the state, loved the people, so it was more or less saying, hey, I'm not sticking around. But I think it's TBD on to be determined there on Chester Frazier, see what happens with him. But I do appreciate Chester Frazier at least sticking around and helping us contact some of these transfer portal targets as well while we wait on Ross Hodge to come over and formulate his staff. That speaks volumes of Chester Frazier's character, something that we kind of already knew, and why he's one of the fan favorites. Would love to have him stay on. We'll see what happens with that one, though, for sure. Tosh Miller said, any former WVU players left in the tournament? Not to my knowledge. I don't think so. Not that I can think of right off anyways, for sure. But, a lot of good news there for both sports, guys. We got some nice tidbits from the press conference in basketball, and then wanted to update the transfer targets that West Virginia has reached out to already. I'm sure that'll be a growing list. It may have already grown by the time that, we've talked here in this stream, but I'll kind of try and keep you guys up to date as they reach out to more here in future streams. And, of course, as we add to the transfer in list in the near future, that'll be nice. As I'm going to go ahead and pull up that transfer portal tracker just to provide one more update here on the basketball side. Then I do got a video that I want to share with you guys on the football side before we wrap up. If I can get the internet to load up here. Okay. If it doesn't want to pull it up there. All right, there we go. So let me go ahead and share the transfer portal tracker with you guys here for the basketball side, similar to what we like to do on the football side. But this is how things are looking basketball-wise thus far, in case you guys did not know. We will hopefully here in the near future be adding some here to the transfers in list, and we'll keep you up to date on that. As far as transfers out, we know Tucker DeVries heading to Indiana. Jonathan Powell in the portal. Don't think he's going to return. KJ Tenner did just recently come out and say he's open to returning potentially, so we'll see what happens there. And then most recently, Monty Hansberry and Sincere Harris also in the portal. We'll see where those guys end up. If they, always got to point out here when we're talking transfer portal, just because a guy enters the portal doesn't mean he can't return. So we'll see what happens, but that's where we sit currently here with the transfer portal update for the basketball side. But that's pretty much all I had, guys. Wanted to talk about a little bit of news there in both sports. Appreciate everyone tuning in here live, despite it being an early Sunday stream here. I know some people will watch on the playback, and of course encourage you guys that are watching live on Facebook and Twitch to come over and subscribe to the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel so you can get access to the pre-recorded episodes, the podcast episodes, in addition to the live streams. But those of you that are here on YouTube, whether you're watching live or you're watching after the fact, you can help us out by hitting that thumbs up button, help us out with the YouTube algorithm, and be sure to subscribe here to stay up to date on both WVU football and WVU basketball as we progress through the offseason in both sports, with a lot happening. New era for both sports with a new coach coming in for both of those. So appreciate you guys as always that have chatted here live as well. If you didn't get a chance to throw your thoughts in the live chat, throw them in the comments. Always appreciate those interactions as well here. But let me share this nice video. We had Coach Rod mic'd up earlier this offseason. Now we had Coach Zach Alley mic'd up, and this one's entertaining as well. So I'll share this one with you. Another great job by the WVU media team as always. Always like to highlight their work here on these live streams. So let's do that one more time and listen to the new West Virginia defensive coordinator that we're all super excited about.
You ever Euro stuff in basketball? Oh, what? Oh, yeah. We lined up a little early, I guess. Almost had it. dig in the end zone, let's go. There you go. That's realistic. Go dig him out. Like, hey, you got to work and go get him. Shuffle. Hit. Let's go get there. Jog the up, down, guys. Get it right, get it in the. Eyes up. Go get it. Wrap it up. Good. Get ground. There you go, Will. Keep your feet running. Wrap it up. Eyes up. Get ground. Left shoulder. Hey, everybody raise your left hand. Everybody raise your left hand. That's your left shoulder. Hit it with that one. Set. Hit. Gain ground. Good, right there. Hey, just don't step so flat, Zay. Help everybody out. Talk. Here we go. Down, down. Yep, now we're inside. Face the guard. Ugh. See the path of the shoulders? Match the path of the shoulders. Good. Hands. Good, right there. Stay with it. Good job. Ball, get it. Golly. Oh, look out, manager. Oh, he's in the way. Go to Sam. Get him out. Scoot up. You're all too damn deep. Ball. Good job, DC. So we got to challenge ourselves, and we got to challenge everybody out here. This group does. You got to be the best version of yourself, and you got to know what to do, and you got to get everybody else lined up and tell them what to do too. That's what great linebackers do. Play with freaking a hard edge and toughness. We got 5 practices left to prove that, all right, you're supposed to be the starter, you're supposed to be here, you got what you got. So go prove it.
I'm fired up now. Might have to run through this wall beside me or something, but I definitely love those mic'd up opportunities we get. The one with Coach Rob was really nice, and man, Zach Alley just continues to impress me, whether it's press conferences, whether it's things other people have to say about him, whether it's his defensive statistics already throughout defenses that he's helped coordinate on, but definitely I'm super excited about the defense, and man, that'll be a welcomed addition to at least have an average to above average defense again. It seems like over the past 2 coaching staffs, that's been one of the main struggles. So I think getting Zach Alley is going to hopefully help alleviate that. And another great job there by the WVU media team with that mic'd up video. With that being said, it's pretty much all I had, guys. So I'm going to catch up on some of these final comments from you guys in the live chat, and then we will call it a stream here. I got to jet off to work here in a bit, as usually is the case. That's why a lot of these come early in the morning when they come early in the morning. But nonetheless, I always appreciate you guys so much that tune into these live and chat along with me. Appreciate the questions and comments, and let's get to some final ones here. Linda Skidmore said Neve could be really good in this system. Hey, that's another good point there. Let's not forget Offrey Neve. How about him, sticking around through multiple coaching changes if he does choose to stick around, which looks like he may, and yeah, he could. He's definitely had time to develop now after redshirting last season, and we'll see what happens with him. He had some moments in his first year there when he got on the field, and I think on the field, guys can tell I mainly talk about football, on the hardwood there, but definitely, I think you look at his tape when he came in, he was talented there playing overseas, and so with more time to develop his game, with more time to learn this system, he could be a contributor in the future. It's a good point there, and it definitely deserves to have a shot at being a contributor and to have a shot at being a role with how loyal he's been to the Mountaineers thus far. Treasure Roblin, appreciate you, says, love the content, bro. Hey, that means a lot. Appreciate the kind words. Hope you always continue to check it out. Hope you're subscribed here if you haven't already, and we'll kind of try and keep you up to date on everything going on here throughout the off season of both these sports, and really appreciate the kind words, and appreciate them from you as well. Earth Ether, love the channel. Thanks for the updates. Thank you, Earth Ether, for tuning in and chiming in. And James Weekly says, can't the players still change their numbers now? Yeah, they can, which that reminds me, I'm going to try sometime this week to do an update on what the spring jersey numbers are, so that you guys that are heading up to the spring showcase on Saturday will know who's what. I'm sure they may have programs or whatever, but that way you'll know ahead of time. And of course, that's not set in stone, because after the spring, we've seen it plenty of times, guys get in the summer and into fall camp and do change their numbers. So I will do another jersey number update just before the first game in the fall. But yeah, they still can change their numbers. I mean, look, even as soon as last season, Gene White was 22, and then fall came around, he had switched to number 1. I think Traylon Ray's first year back when he was here, he was 18 all throughout the spring, and then switched to the number 7 that he ended up wearing there in the fall. A couple of times I bought a player's jersey after the spring, and then had to buy another one because they changed their number for the fall. So yeah, it very much can change for sure. Channel member Trey Edwards, is Stone medically retired? I don't know if he's medically retired. I know his injury was a bad one, but from what I understand, he wasn't even with the team for the final couple of weeks of the season or so. So, I mean, he's one that's out now as well. I don't know if he's going to choose to play at another destination. It's kind of mystery as to what he's going to do. But yeah, he's no longer with the team. I do know that much, and hope he's not medically retired. He was a really talented player. I know that was a scary injury for him that may have led him to make that decision, though. But nonetheless, wish him the best wherever he does end up for sure. Hate that it turned out the way that it did with him here at WVU, because he could have been a good contributor for sure. I know Collins is 85. Hey, that's right. Y'all watch out for my guy Dom Collins this year. Mercer County native, super speedster, 4.2 40. Going to have a chance to get on the field at the wide receiver position there in one of the slot positions, and I think will factor into the battle there for the returning job there as well. You guys know we're big fans of Dom Collins here on the CRW. As Linda Skidmore says, Dom Collins can line up in the backfield, give Rich Rod some speed, jet sweeps, screens, wheel routes. He would be a great screen player, as Trey says. Yeah, I mean, I think about the way they use Darius Raynaud, and if you put Dom Collins in that role, I think that'd be special. Love Dom. His brother's a friend of the show here, so definitely always praising Dom and pushing for his success, and think he has a great chance to have a really good career here. James Lucas said White said he might try to get number 4. I could see that happening. I know he was number 4 in high school, I do believe, so he may have wanted that 4 when he came to WVU, but of course, didn't CJ switch to it first, so I guess CJ had it claimed before he did, but he might now switch to 4. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I kind of like him as number 1, though. Number 1 in your hearts, number 1 in your programs, right? That's what I like to say about Jaheim White. At least that's in my case, because, of course, he's my favorite player on the roster. As you guys know, I can't rave about Jaheim enough, and he's going to have a huge year in this Rich Rod offense, which they've yet again continued to praise him. He's the one player that's they have praised outside of course the quarterback position and the long snapper position. They know what they have in him, and they have made some allowances that feel like will keep him on the roster in regards to Jaheim and what he's receiving and stuff like that. So I think, fingers crossed, barring any surprises, Jaheim White's not going anywhere, and he's going to have a really big year, whether he's in number 1 or number 4, James. So I am excited about that for sure. We'll see what happens, though. We'll see what happens with the roster, and hey, we'll get a first look at the team here in short order, less than a week now. If you haven't got your ticket, claim it. They're free. No reason for us not to pack out that spring showcase coming up this Saturday, and excited to talk about it. We'll have some more football coverage coming out this week. I'm going to try and get that jersey number update video out at some point, and of course there'll be plenty more basketball news to talk about as well as the roster builds, as the staff builds here in the new future, new era for both sports there, and excited to cover it here on the CRW, and we'll keep you up to date on everything going on throughout both those sports. So be sure to subscribe here if you haven't already. If you didn't get a chance to chat with us live, throw your thoughts in the comments. Always appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the CRW community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.